Welcome to the second ever episode of The South's Got Something to Say. Jonathan Adams here with Kelsey Kramer. Kelsey, how are we doing?
After the Julio Jones trade, we're processing everything.
I have a lot of questions about the Julio Jones. Let me walk you through my day yesterday because everyone wants to know about my day, but I really want to know about your day. But yesterday, a sleepy Sunday. My big question is if you had coffee before or after. How'd you have coffee before the Julio Jones trade went down?
After, because I saw it 20 minutes later.
So you saw it, and then Kelsey's I'm going to have all the coffee now.
So then had to go, I actually didn't have coffee yesterday, which...
Well, there we go. You're like a living legend.
I know.
As you get older, you just have to have some liquid fuel, so...
It just all happened so fast, I'm just like...
So you get all the alerts.
The natural.
So yesterday, I'll walk you through why. Then I'm curious to get your reaction. So yesterday, I'm thinking. I mean, it was a great sports weekend, especially in Atlanta. So here in Atlanta, we had the Dodgers Braves, the final game where the Braves had opportunity to take the series. We had the Hawks Sixers game 1, and then just in sports in general, after that, we had Clippers Mavericks game 7. So a lot going on. So I'm preparing. I'm trying to match up my Braves hat with my Trae Young jersey because my Magic are terrible, so I've adopted the Hawks now that I'm in Atlanta. Still love the Magic, but they hurt me a lot. Anyway, that's for another podcast. But so then my phone starts blowing up, and I'm like, what is going on? And I'm like, oh, the Julio, just a random Sunday morning, we're just going to drop the Julio Jones on like a massive sports day already. So that's kind of how I found out about it. As I was like, oh, okay, here we are. What was your reaction though when everything kind of went down? What do you think, Falcons fans? And as a Falcons fan, what are you feeling? Kind of processing it. Obviously, you knew it was coming, but now it's like official.
Yeah, I mean, you always know it's coming. Well, for the most part, the rumors leak and all that. But when it happens, it's like, holy cow, this is happening. Haven't even showered yet. I mean, granted, it happened at 11:28.
It's pretty early. I don't know exactly. I didn't have my phone on me right that moment. So yeah, I think it was like 10:30, 11 a.m. Eastern. So yeah, it's pretty early.
So, but I caught it late, and I ran downstairs, and I forget why. Oh, probably to get some water, and I was like, Julio's going to the Titans. Like I said that out loud to my stepmom, was just like, oh wow, it happened. And then I'm reading into it, and I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. They got a second-round pick and not a first-round pick. And I was so excited for A.J. Brown that, I didn't really – the hurt didn't hit me at first because I saw his tweets rolling in, and that made me laugh, made me smile as a Falcons fan. And then, I'm reading everyone's reaction. I'm watching these sad videos, and I start tearing up. But it was just a numb feeling. It wasn't after – finally processing everything and realizing why it happened, I'm happy for Julio Jones because this has been a 2-year ongoing situation for him, and he finally got what he wanted, and I think he deserves that. So, yeah, it sucks, but it's business.
Yeah, and I would love to hear where everyone's situated at. Type in your city and your state. Just curious where everyone's chiming in from. Bucks fans on the feed. We're definitely going to be getting to you guys here in a second. How this trade obviously impacts the whole division. Really, the Bucks now go from facing Julio Jones 2 times a year to not anymore. So obviously, Titans fans chiming in, super pumped about. But the real MVP, yeah, AJ Brown's TikTok. I mean, the real MVP is AJ Brown of this whole situation. He's position himself well to have a little show if he ever wants to when he's got plenty of football left. But yeah, so obviously the Falcons are in a tough spot because they were pushing before the draft for a first round pick, and clearly they didn't have any. We had heard reports leading up to this trade that they had multiple offers for the first round pick. Well, candidly, if they had that, we probably would have saw the trade happen, right? So It's just one of those things where this current regime inherited a bad situation in terms of the cap. But someone was joking because the Falcons were in a position, as you know, where they couldn't even sign those rookies to do deals. So someone was joking today that they're probably starting to get calls from the rookies like, hey, remember us? We're trying to get we got that agent loan. Can we finally get some real money now that we're official? So the Julio thing was one of those deals where you're in a relationship and your partner's threatening to break up with you for like a few months, and you think, okay, maybe they're just like bluffing. But then when you see that Rappaport tweet, or I think it was Diana Racina who broke it, you're like, oh, this is like real. Like they really are like breaking up. Or a good friend, like their relationship's on the rocks. You're kind of like trying to talk them out of it, but then you see, oh, okay, they're really this is final. So that's kind of was my take on it. They're trying to make good on a bad situation, basically.
It probably won't hit me until week 1. I mean, I was ready for it, but like I'm still not ready for it. I don't know. And like you said, it was inevitable. It was going to happen. And after reading why it happened and everything, it's like, okay, this makes sense. It's okay. Falcons are still we're going to compete. We might lose the season. Yeah. Like, without Julio Jones, like we're not in that win now mindset. We might be if, Kyle Pitts lives up to his expectations. But yeah, I don't know. Do you think that the trade was even, or?
I don't think it was even, but I don't know what the issue wasn't Julio Jones. I mean, think about it. They got a 2nd-round pick from Mohamed Sanu. Was it 2 years ago? So you're looking at similar compensation. Obviously, I think the Falcons got a 4th-rounder here, future the 2023 as well. So they got a little bit more, but you're basically looking at the same compensation for Mohamed Sanu. Now the Patriots obviously overpaid for Sanu, like that's been well documented. But I don't know I guess this was my thing from the beginning. When you look at that 4th pick, I just thought, and I love Kyle Pitts, I'm not necessarily against the pick, but I think they should have gone Justin Fields, because if you're going to go through a rebuild, like go all the way, because now you're in a situation where, and I'm not trying to bum Falcons fans out, I hope I'm wrong in all of this, but I'm just looking at it like, is this team positioned to make the playoffs? And you're going to look at, okay, we're going to have Matt Ryan for 2-3 more years. And if he doesn't make the playoffs, then Ryan doesn't have any trade value. So you can't move him like we saw, because I think they could have got a similar deal to what you saw with Stafford. Trade Ryan, you're going to eat some money regardless, but maybe just start over from the ground floor, versus what I think could happen where you're kind of in this in-between stage and you lose Julio, your roster still has holes in it, and you don't have, even without Julio, you don't have much like wiggle room to like make a big addition now. So that's my only thing, is if you're going to go rebuild, just go full out. But now we're in this kind of interesting in-between stage where you have Matt Ryan, you have Ridley, you have pieces, but is it enough to dethrone the Bucks for some of our Bucks fans here? I don't think it is, and I think it's going to be really challenging just to make the postseason next year. So I don't know. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that Arthur Smith and the new regime can turn things around and maybe revitalize Atlanta in terms of the football on both sides, because there's just so many holes in the defense, particularly. So I don't know. That's my concern, is just that they're not picking a lane in terms of rebuild, or like their comments after the draft were, hey, we're reloading, we're gonna compete next year. And then you go trade away Julio, which you kind of have to do, it seems like, and he wanted out. So I don't know what they were supposed to do, but I just don't see this as a team necessarily that's gonna contend right away, unless they can just keep this new coaching staff completely works wonders, which it could happen. I don't know.
Right, and we have Arthur Smith now, so that's a big change, and I think that will definitely, help balance out the loss of Julio, in the sense that his coaching is A+. I mean, at least from what we've seen with the Titans the past 2 years. But like I said, processing this and learning like the real truth behind it all, it makes sense. And I think at the end of the day, I think both teams, both Titans and the Falcons, won the deal. Falcons are not going to be paying any of Julio Jones's contract, and that's huge. For the next 3 seasons, that's huge for us. And yeah, it's not going to make a big impact, but at the end of the day, we need room. We're going to need room to keep Calvin Ridley, and we wouldn't have been able to keep him and Julio Jones next season. So we are in the rebuilding stage, even though they said we're not in the rebuilding stage, but now we're focusing on paying Julio Jones, and then we're going to have to pay Kyle Pitts if he continues to do well. So I don't know. I'm just hoping. I'm hoping that we can still compete, even though you don't believe we will. But I think we have it. I think we have what we need to do to be a contender. So.
Well, and to be clear, the problem with the Falcons last year wasn't the offense, really. I mean,
yeah, definitely not.
It wasn't like you're looking like how are they going to score points? It's like the Falcons' inability to stop anyone last year. I see Scott very anti Justin Fields. Feel free to chime in. That's a good take. Why are you so against? Is there just that much faith in Matt Ryan? It's fair, and I think that I'm not trying to say Matt Ryan's washed or anything. I just think if you're going to go in on Matt Ryan, you're basically saying we got to make the playoffs in these next 2 years to really take advantage of that versus trading him and try to get some value and start over. But we'll see. I mean, there's some intriguing pieces that the Falcons have. It's just when you're looking at a team like, say, the Bucs in your own division that you have to face twice, it's going to be challenging when they're returning their entire team that just won the Super Bowl, not just won the Super Bowl, but dominated. So you're looking at a very tough situation because just to get out, to make the playoffs, the goal is to win your division. And then there's obviously the wild card spots. But your first goal is try to win your division. And the Falcons, the Saints, and the Panthers are at an extreme disadvantage just with luck of the draw, right?
Yeah, but if Kyle Pitts can be the next George Kittle, even better, hopefully, then we have something to work with. And Matt Ryan's a good quarterback.
Mm-hmm, for
and
sure.
then Calvin Ridley, and then Russell Gage. Everyone they're sleeping. Yesterday, they were getting so much hate. Well, not hate, but everyone forgets about them,
Deidre, my man, are you saying that you're on the Fields bandwagon with me, or are you just like everyone else trashing my take, which is fine. I'm okay. I'll be okay either way, but I'm just curious if I have at least one supporter before I die on this hill. It sounds like I'm not anti Kyle Pitts. I love, he's an amazing player. In an ideal world, you draft Kyle Pitts and then you figure out a way to fix the situation with Julio. We were talking this morning. If you guys haven't seen it, check out everything at Heavy, but also check out Albert Breer's piece on Sports Illustrated that really went into great detail about the situation where it seems that Julio went to the team back in March, really had broached the subject of a trade back in, I think he said 2018, 2019, when they were talking about that extension. Obviously, the Falcons acquiesced and said, okay, we're going to give you this massive deal. And then when things kind of turned around the way that they did, when Quinn was fired, that was kind of like the thing where Julio was like, okay, it's time for a change. And Julio went to the team March, maybe sooner, and requested a trade. Then we started to hear the rumblings from the Falcons that they were open to dealing Julio, whereas it seemed it was basically like they didn't want to put Julio's business out there. And, because of just how much respect they have for him and to keep sort of that goodwill towards potential, future players that might want to play for the Falcons, and tried to handle it the right way. And then Breer also said, last week I was critical on the way that it was handled on the Undisputed call with Shannon Sharp. And Breer was adamant that he actually didn't know, which brings up all sorts of questions for me, how Shannon Sharp still is employed, because that's I can't imagine just calling up a random player and just putting their business on live TV and not telling them. That's just super, I don't know, it's just a dirty thing to do, in my opinion. So
I like it. Okay, I know, whatever, it's dirty.
I like it if I'm Fox. I mean, because that's what we've been talking about for a couple of weeks. But go ahead with your take, though.
No, you're right. And Fox, they can obviously do what they want to do and still keep the job. So it was great entertainment on our part, and he trashed the Cowboys, which personally I'm a big fan of. So
I hear you.
No,
it made for good. It made our jobs a lot easier.
I just don't. Kurt Bankert, the Falcons' former backup, said that Julio had announced it on his Twitch, which if you don't follow Kurt Bankert, you should, because he's great with fan engagement, and he's a cool guy. But Julio had went on his Twitch chat and I guess said he was looking for, to play for a contender and then a different QB. That's kind of what Bankert was saying whenever who reported that tweet the other day? I can't remember.
I know what you're talking about, though, because there was some talk that Julio was frustrated. Like, I mean, they said it several times, I want a quarterback that can throw the deep ball. In so many ways, he's kind of throwing Matt Ryan under the bus a little bit, you could say.
So
whether
sad.
intentionally or not, but
anyway, but no one, no fan or anyone had said anything. And this happened months ago. So that's interesting how, it's all coming to surface when this has been going on for 2 years and fans have known about it for months now, but no one said anything.
Yeah, it's just one of those situations where you hope that the Falcons can compete this season. The new guys are just like in a really tough spot because they need some of these contracts to come off the books so they can really make noise and bring in their own guys. And so right now their only options are to build through the draft each year. So I think there could be some pain ahead, but this is kind of one of those things where you rip off the Band-Aid. You kind of have to trade Julio just so you can sign those dudes unless he agreed to restructure his deal, which clearly it didn't seem like that was something that he wanted to do. So the big thing, as you mentioned, was to not have that money tying up the cap anymore and not have to pay it. There were other teams involved that were interested but wanted the Falcons to pay a portion of that future salary, which we kind of saw back when the Texans traded Jadeveon Clowney to the Seahawks. They had ate some of that deal. We see that from time to time when teams can't find a suitor. So for the fact that they found a suitor without having to pay, there's something to be said for that. But it's definitely, I know fans aren't like, when you see that tweet come out yesterday morning, I don't think Falcons fans are like,
this is great. This is good.
Because I was going to do an exercise, but I didn't want to pile on because I don't want Falcons fans to feel bummed out. But I was going to do an exercise because you just read off the second round picks in terms of just receivers. Some of those are going to be hits and a lot of them are going to be misses just because of the nature of the draft. So a lot of times we hear future picks, and that's exciting for us as football nerds. But when you really look at it, a pick has to become a player, and that player, there's just so many barriers for that pick to become a contributor. Even if it was a first rounder, it sounds exciting, but we see all the time that first round picks don't pan out, unfortunately. So I think the Falcons made the best out of a bad situation, and there wasn't going to be no way where they would completely win the trade, so to speak, as we said in the headline. So keep chiming in, guys. We want to hear where you're watching this from, what city, what state you guys are chiming in for. I know Bucs fans are thrilled to not have to see Julio Jones lined up against their secondary. So be curious to get Bucs fans' perspective if you want to chime in the chat. How are you feeling after the Julio trade? I'm sure thrilled that those two Falcons matchups will be Julio Jones lists as they come up here on the schedule. Was there anything else on that front, Kelsey, that you had in terms of the Julio thing?
Yeah, to add that Brewer noted next season, if Julio Jones plays well, he's likely going to ask for more money.
Right.
So, and they're the team that can afford that, and that's why they were the only team who was consistent, because they were the only team who could, take on that contract. And people throwing Ryan Tannehill under the bus is also kind of sad. Like Julio Jones said, he wanted a deep ball QB, and in 2019, Ryan Tannehill was ranked number 19 for deep ball passes, 7-to-1 TD ratio or touchdown to interception ratio, which I think is interesting. And that was when he won NFC comeback player of the year. So
that was interesting. I was when we watched that AJ Brown video, and he's hyping up Derrick Henry, he's hyping up himself, and then he gets to Ryan Tannehill, and he's like, "Yeah, we have Ryan Tannehill," and then he just goes on to this. So all these nice things about Derrick Henry. I was like, "Oh man, poor Ryan Tannehill." But I'm sure, Ryan Tannehill's thrilled. He's got one of the best receiving.
Right?
He's got so many offensive weapons that Titans team is going to be nasty. I know this is not a Titans podcast, but.
Yeah. But back in 2018, Kyler Murray was the number 1 deep ball passer, which is also interesting because Beer noted also that all NFC West teams had, inquired about the Julio Jones trade. So
yeah, and we're gonna get. I know that we'll probably touch a little bit on the Seahawks and the 49ers at the end of the show, just some of the offers that have been thrown around, or lack of offers, I guess you could say too. So that's in the business we call that a tease. So we'll come back to that, but we'll move on to some Bucs news. Tom Brady made headlines again last week by who's a better social media follower right now than Tom Brady. I can't think of very many. He left the Patriots and apparently is now just like a social media king, but he dropped an Instagram video where from his recent workout where he was without a knee brace, which is significant because the last time we saw Brady post like a elongated video of him throwing, he was on a beach, I think with is it David Beckham? Anyway, he was on the beach. It looked like he had like one leg. He was basically like hobbling around. And then Brady now posts this video where he's running around without a brace. He's throwing without a brace and looks like the Brady that we saw torch the Chiefs defense a few months ago. So be sure to check that out on our site, heavy.com. You can check it on the Bucs part. We broke down the video and we actually let you watch the video, which is really the key part. So make sure to check that out. But as a Falcons fan or a Falcons supporter, how do you feel? What's your takeaways heading into next season? Are you thinking like same old Tom Brady, or do you think there's a chance that perhaps the Falcons and the Saints and the Panthers could see could we finally start to see that TB12 method take a hit this year, or you think it's same old Brady until we see differently?
I think it's same old Brady, especially his knee brace is off. He's a competitor. He's the best competitor in the NFL. Like we saw that last season. I'm afraid of him. I'm genuinely afraid of him. Gotta be probably the nicest guy, and I never met him. I've only heard things. So when Falcons have to play them, I don't see them winning. Unless he, gets hurt and isn't 100%, but at the same time, what was the game where he played terribly last year?
Well, there was that game against the Bears where he thought there was a fifth down, and then he held up the four. It was fourth down. He holds up the four fingers, and it was technically already fourth down, so he forgot the down. That wasn't a great look, and he actually trolled himself last week on. I think Matt wrote about that, but he kind of apparently he's on TikTok. Brady's he's on social media platforms. I didn't even know where the thing. I know what TikTok is, guys. Don't make fun of me, but I'm just saying he's now going from just joining Twitter, I think a year ago, to now he's just on everything. But he was basically saying, yeah, I forgot what down it is, because he had denied it during the season. He's like, no, it was a thing. And it's just well, we all saw it. Just admit that you forgot the down. It's not like the end of the world. And he finally was like, yeah, I forgot the down. So, that's the thing about Brady gets all the attention with the Bucs, but it's that supporting cast that allows Brady to ease some of the pressure that he had with the Patriots, where you're looking and he's basically throwing to receivers like myself, which is no one wants that, not even me. So he goes to the Bucs where he has Chris Godwin and eventually Antonio Brown and Mike Evans and Scotty Miller. There's other guys I could keep mentioning, but I had spoken with. We finally came out with our story. You can check it out on our site with Levante David, and I spent about 30 minutes, which unfortunately you can't transcribe 30 minutes of interview without anyone wanting to read all of that content. But there's a lot of quotes that I just couldn't get to. But it was cool just to talking to him, because when you looked at that Bucs roster before Brady, it was solid, but Jameis had 30 interceptions, not last season, but the season prior, and the team just couldn't do anything. It's they won 7 games in spite of turning the ball over nearly 2 picks a game. They were averaging. So I was talking to Levante about, if you're Brady, you can go to any team you want, basically. I mean, not any team, but it's not like Brady didn't have options. There were rumors that the Chargers were interested. The Saints, before Breeze confirmed that he was coming back for his final season. The 49ers, there were some rumblings there. So there was other teams interested, but I was talking to Levante about, you guys obviously had an appealing roster where Brady selected the Bucs, and at the time it was kind of made fun of, Brady's just going to retire in Florida. But when you actually looked at the roster, and people that watch football knew that team was a really loaded roster that unfortunately it had subpar play from the quarterback position. So that was cool to just talk to him and just kind of get his perspective on on playing with Brady and going from, Levante, I think it was 2012 he was drafted, and they didn't have a winning season for those first 4 years. So you imagine you start your profession, and wherever you're at, whatever organization you're at, it's just like failure for 4 years. And then now they go from that to just being transformed last year with the addition of Brady. But it was a supporting cast really that I think got them over the hump. So be sure to check that out. It was really fun to talk with him and just kind of get his perspective on things. But
and it was fun reading. It was I had fun reading it. I felt like I was.
I paid Kelsey to say all of those nice things. Keep going.
No, I wanted to. The opening paragraph was great. It felt like I was a Tampa Bay fan. I'm jealous, but y'all have this special Budweiser bottles.
I had fun writing it. Hopefully fans will get a kick out of, a lot of times, a lot of our stories are just by nature of it have to be quick hitters, news stuff that we cover. Just that's the nature of it. There's always news coming. So this was more of a get a cup of coffee or some sweet tea since we're in the South, whatever it is that your beverage of choice is, and take a few minutes and read it. Hopefully you'll get. But Levante was great. I mean, we got disconnected a couple of times, and then he, sometimes when you get disconnected, you just assume, especially when you're like my schedule's pretty open for the most part, but Levante has, things going on. He called me back a couple of times when we had some connection issues. So it was just cool to kind of talk with him and get his perspective on winning a Super Bowl, especially winning a Super Bowl at your home stadium. So,
yeah.
But this division, there's just so many fun storylines. You look at the Panthers and they have, a new quarterback with Sam Darnold. They've got, a bunch of new weapons there. You look at the Saints, and you're the first year without. It's going to be super weird when the Falcons square off with the Saints or the Bucs square off with the Saints, and instead of Drew Brees, it's Taysom Hill or it's Jameis Winston or your boy Ian Book or whoever ends up, or maybe a player to be named later that we don't know about. I don't know. Just thinking about that Saints team, it's like Drew Brees has not only been synonymous with that team but that city for so long. It's just going to be kind of a weird thing to wrap your mind around.
Do you think he'll come out of retirement?
Breeze, I just can't see it just because his arms is
done.
He puts the work in, but it was kind of clear by the time the last year or two. It's just it's interesting with quarterbacks. I feel like it's all good until it isn't, which seems like, okay, thank you for sports writer for telling me. But you look at a guy let's say Peyton Manning, and he's playing elite football until he isn't. It just feels like the drop off. That's why with Brady it's going to be so interesting, because it could be one of those things where he's just elite till he's 75, and then age 76 he finally drops off. It's just there doesn't seem like there's that gradual thing like you see in receivers or running backs where gradually they start to slow down. With quarterbacks, it almost feels like you're watching one season and they're amazing, and then the next season it just goes. I don't know how exact. I'm sure there's science behind it, but with Breeze, it just became pretty clear. He just didn't have that arm strength that he used to have. But the Saints were able. With Sean Payton, they're able to kind of makeshift an offense around that. It's not like you have to have an amazing arm to be an NFL quarterback. But I just think by the end, his body was not only his arm strength not there, but the hits and all that had taken a toll. But what do you think? When we talk about not just with the Falcon situation, but just the rest of the division, are there any storylines that stick out to you as as from a Falcons perspective, as you're looking at the rest of the division, what kind of sticks out to you, if anything, from some of these teams?
I'm storyline, nothing specific, but I'm excited to see what. The Saints are we kind of saw the Saints without Drew Brees last year, so we have a kind of a feel there. But I'm excited for the Panthers. Not excited, but interested to see what they have to offer next year.
Yeah, especially with Darnold, it's just
Mm-hmm.
I thought that might be a situation where they trade for Darnold and then potentially draft Fields or draft, Mac Jones or whatever quarterback fell to them. But they obviously have enough faith in Darnold that they opted to go a different direction there. So with the corner, I'm blanking on his name, Horn, instead of going offensive. So they're definitely showing that they have trust in him to at least prove what he has. And that, wasn't an ideal situation with the Jets. So he's going to have every opportunity to kind of resurrect his career. The thing with quarterbacks is I feel like there's kind of if you're not good immediately, we saw that with like Josh Rosen and other guys. It's like next guy up. Whereas it used to be, it seemed like quarterbacks got 10 years once you were a first round pick, especially. So definitely has a shorter window to prove, but he's got a second chance that a lot of guys don't get. So
yeah, Christian McCaffrey is back.
Yeah, good point too. Before we head out, we should talk about maybe some of the deals that did not happen for Julio. So feel free to chime in with any of the rumors that you remember that were kind of not just the Titans, but there were other teams. Like I think the Patriots were there for a while, or some talk about the Raiders. We're going to talk a little bit about the Seahawks and the NFC West teams. Albert Breer reported today that the Seahawks, and really I think the entire NFC West, were all interested, but they never actually formally made an offer, which is kind of hard to make a trade with a team if they're not actually going to offer. And I think when you look at the Seahawks perspective, it seemed like they were interested, and primarily interested because of Russell Wilson, I would guess, is kind of pushing that situation. But they weren't going to make a trade for Julio without the Falcons eating some of the money. And I don't think the Falcons, unless it was like they just couldn't find a deal elsewhere, like the Falcons weren't going to do that. So I think that was kind of like the deal breaker from the Falcons. I would guess probably the deal breaker for the 49ers as well. Is that kind of your take too, from a Falcons perspective? Like, what was so appealing about the Titans deal versus maybe some of the other rumors that you had written about over the last few weeks?
Appealing about the Titans deal was their players recruiting Julio Jones to, endlessly. That was the best part. But the fact that Vrabel had actually contacted Nick Saban months ago, and I think before the draft, and was asking him about Julio Jones, like, is this worth it? And that was a big part of his deal to go all in on Jones. But also, Breer noted that we're just hyping up Albert Breer today, but he said that the Patriots actually hadn't really no interest in a trade there, which I thought was interesting, because the rumors were saying that Julio Jones had said he wanted to play with Cam Newton.
Yeah. There's Atlanta connection there too, because Cam grew up in College Park, so nearby in Atlanta.
Spends his off seasons there.
I think he actually has a cigar/restaurant spot. If it lasted through COVID, he has one right by the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which so he's definitely plugged in here. So they have a connection. It's always seen like working out and with Atlanta guys. So it would have been an interesting connection. Was there ever? I'm just trying to think back through the different rumors because it seemed like there was a lot. Was there ever? Did you kind of think that the Titans were like, this is where I see Julio landing, or was there any point in time where you saw, when you're writing about them, kind of covering and hearing all this stuff, where it seemed like another team? I see Gino's comment thinking that it kind of was Arthur Smith helping out the Titans there on his way out. Was there ever a point where you thought, okay, this could be a team where they're going to land Julio, like whether it's the Patriots or another team, as you were kind of like sorting through all this gossip over the last few months?
I thought Belichick would give in, only because when the report came out that Julio had said he wanted to play with Cam Newton, I thought that was like a jackpot for the Patriots. But it all comes down to money. And Gino, you're saying that, Arthur Smith might have looked out for his former team, but they were also the only team that, again, has the money, especially for next year, if, Julio wants that bigger contract, if he plays well. But sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. When they first said Titans were a long shot, I was like, yeah, that's a long shot, because were they a team that didn't have a first round pick on the table to offer? But then it came out that there was actually never a first pick on the table at all. It was only talked about. I was all for the Titans, and I think A.J. Brown had a lot to do with that. He didn't only recruit Julio, he recruited me and a lot of other people, I feel like. But I think that was the best landing spot he could have went to. Seahawks would be cool, but I didn't see that happening.
I think that was the thing why the Seahawks, in terms of wanting some of that salary relief, it wasn't as if, they have DK Metcalf. They're going to have to pay him in a couple years here. They just drafted Eskridge from Western Michigan in the second round. They have Tyler Lockett that they just signed to an extension. So it's like they weren't going to – obviously, the Seahawks are one of those aggressive teams where they gave up multiple firsts for Jamal Adams. They were traded for Jadeveon Clowney. They're always one of those teams, it seems like, it's always in the mix for these big deals. So they're always kind of sniffing around, but I don't think it was ever serious enough where they're like, we're willing to give up significant cap space in the future for a guy that is going to come in, and we already have, like, especially if Eskridge pans out, the rookie, they already have 3 strong receivers. So I think it was just one of those things where they're like, maybe if it was a position of need, they would have been more, with Adams, they were obviously willing to, looking at potentially signing him to a new extension, trading multiple picks. They're willing to mortgage their future because the defense was so atrocious prior to his arrival, and I think showed strides last year to improve. But when you're talking about, that was the tough part for the Falcons, because I think teams are looking at Justin Jefferson with the Vikings. They're looking at AJ Brown, the DK Metcalf, these receivers that are coming in and producing right away on those rookie deals versus, okay, Julio just got paid. He's entering this new deal. He played 7-8 games last year. Nice. There's warning signs there. So it put, I think, the Falcons behind the 8 ball, because you're looking at, why would I trade draft capital, mortgage my future cap wise, when I can find that guy and potentially not Julio. You're not going to find Julio Jones, but you can find a productive receiver, day 1, day 2, even day 3 now. Are you going to get Julio Jones? No, but like, we're seeing teams have success, in a variety of ways for that receiver position. I'm not saying it's like the running back where, it's rare to see like guys go early, but we are seeing teams have success with some of these later round receivers, which I think puts the onus back on GMs to say, no, we're okay without trading for a $15 million, like 32-year-old receiver who's just starting that deal. So I think, I know Falcons fans are disappointed by in terms of the payoff, and it makes sense, but it's just one of those situations where that deal was not a good deal when they signed it. And I think that, Thomas Dimitroff came out and said, like, yeah, we signed that deal because we thought Julio was going to retire with the Falcons. We were shooting for a Super Bowl. And clearly a lot of things didn't pan out. He's out a job now. Dan Quinn's with, defensive coordinator with the Cowboys now. So like, things change very quickly in the NFL. So if you're glass half full, the Falcons got rid of that contract. The more opportunity for Ridley, who's also, like you said, is going to need to get paid here in the near future. Russell Gage, there's other guys that are going to get opportunities. They drafted Darby, I believe, right in the 6th round this year. So there's going to be guys that are eating up. Obviously, Pitts is kid at number 1 to eat up. But just from like the NFC West perspective, the Rams, the Seahawks, the 49ers, all of those teams have, solid receiving corps. So the idea of mortgaging your future it was the contract thing and the health concerns, I think, that ultimately pushed them away from making a serious run at Julio, which kind of gave the Falcons no choice. Do you want to go into OTAs with this Julio, to minicamp with this Julio story, like being every day? Clearly, I think by their decision to do this on a Sunday morning, clearly that they didn't want that. They were tired of this. Once June 1st hit, they're kind of like, okay, it's go time. It wasn't even not even a week, right, when they could really make that deal from a financial perspective. So I don't know. Feel free, if you guys have any last thoughts, feel free to chime in here. We'll get to anything else.
John, you like this? Like, keeping Matt and trading Julio is just crazy.
So keeping Matt and trading Julio is just crazy. And we look at it. So he's saying trade Matt Ryan and keep Julio. Yeah, I mean, Gino, the argument, someone wise just had said potentially, you draft Justin Fields, you keep Julio Jones, you keep Ridley. I mean, that's the argument, right? Because I'd have to look at the numbers. The issue is that they redid Matt's deal to, so once they redid Matt's deal, they're basically saying, okay, we're going to have to look at a different position in the draft. I mean, they didn't say that, but that's kind of what they said. Also a good point. Yeah, I mean, how many 35-year-old receivers are you seeing out there like just torching it versus if Matt Ryan can maybe drive down to Tampa and get a few tips from Brady on how to extend his career, you're looking at a guy that could be there for a while. So that's a good point.
Yes,
so, yeah,
Fred. We'll be fine. We will be fine.
I like Fred's little profile. That's cool.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, this will be the thing we'll be talking about for years to come, depending on how things shake out. What will be like this draft, and because it's very rare that you have a top 5 pick. So the hope is that Pitts is going to be one of those Travis Kelce, George Kittle like game changers that can be even more valuable than a receiver. Because if you're a tight end, you're blocking, you're lining up inside, you can line up, in the slot, you can line up outside. Pitts can run all the routes. So and definitely can be a guy that can do that.
If worse comes to worse, they'll put him in at receiver.
Exactly. Yes. So. Maybe Pitts can also, if things break down with Matt Ryan, maybe Pitts throws the ball to Pitts. So we're just let's go all in on Kyle Pitts this year.
But I do think Hayden Hurst is looking good too at OTA.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that could be a fun duo to watch.
What do you think? Do you see Julio having a good season next year with the Titans, or what do you think? What are reasonable expectations for Titans fans on what to expect from Julio next year? Do you think, given everything you know and saw the last few years?
And coming off an injury, I don't know how. I've never had it. I don't know how hamstring injuries heal. Like, do they ever fully heal all the way?
I'm not athletic enough to get injured. I tell my friends that all the time. So okay, I don't know. But I mean, I don't.
I just found out from the Breer that Albert Breer just came out with all the truths about Julio Jones. So y'all have to go check that out at Sports Illustrated. But he said that Julio Jones has an ongoing foot injury that never healed. So
yeah,
he's been playing. I don't know how long he's been playing with that injury. I know he's played through several injuries, but
yeah, that's the one thing about Julio up until this year, really, I would say, is like that guy played through so many injuries and he was always willing to like suit up. And I think there's probably a lot of injuries that Falcons fans don't know about, that we don't know about, that we're not privy to. And you could say that about any, NFL player, candidly, but him especially, I think he was dealing with multiple things. He was dinged up that, that we just weren't privy to, or he just was able to play through and still play at a high level, honestly.
Yeah, I see him back to 1,000-yard season next year.
Yeah.
I want him to do well over there.
The thing that was weird about Julio is he'd have like 1,400 yards and he'd have like 4 touchdowns. It's just like, for whatever reason, I don't know what it was, but him and Matt couldn't get on the same page. The last few years, especially, like he had some big touchdown seasons, but the last few years it just seemed like Matt had trouble like finding him in the red zone. It seemed like Ridley or even Gage has gotten some of those. Like when you look at the games where like Julio would just post like 200 yards and have like no touchdowns. It's just like one of those things. So it'd be interesting to see if maybe him and Tannehill can like, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe he ends up being like a double-digit touchdown guy and the red zone threat. And, maybe A.J. Brown ends up getting like a lot of the yardage. So when you have a guy like Julio with that speed and with that size, like you would think he would be getting more touchdowns. So that would be the one thing I'll be watching. But they also have Derrick Henry, know. So I guess it's a embarrassment of riches. It's a good problem to have if you're in Nashville right now watching that team.
Right, who's going to have the better season. And they don't have their offensive coordinator anymore, so that'll be interesting.
Sure, yeah. So a lot of questions to answer. We covered a lot, Kelsey. Is there anything that we did not cover? Anything you're writing about that we can direct people to? Anything exciting in the next coming months? We're what, two months away, maybe less than 2 months away from training camp. So we're almost there, guys. You did it. We're going to bring you through these dark days of summer. But is there anything that you're working on these days, or anything you want to point to that's fun?
Nothing too fun yet. I know when training camp starts, it'll be more fun with, when the players address the media, their media days, and just keeping up with them. Hopefully we can see Marlon Davidson come back and make a big impact this season. So that'll be something to keep an eye on through camp. And that camp starts on June 8th, on Tuesday, tomorrow. Camp starts tomorrow, mini camp.
So we'll have some fun stuff in the coming days, I'm sure, both Bucks-wise, Falcons-wise, Biscuit-wise. If you follow us on social media, I'm sure you'll see some of that. But yeah, so this was our second episode of South's Got Something to Say, which I meant to thanks for everyone that's continued to watch here, but I meant to give Andre 3000 a shout out for the name, which I believe came in I'll have to do more research on the exact date, but I believe it was the Source Awards, when he was giving a speech and basically took the award and said the South's got something to say. And then that kind of put Atlanta on the map in terms of the music scene, hip hop, which they were already kind of doing that. So I'm not going to give you a full history lesson, but I just wanted to give, we're not creative enough to just come up with the title on our own. So I wanted to give them a shout out. And so we're happy to do this. And also, you think about, to me, I think about, and maybe Kelsey, you can chime in too, but when we talk about the South as a region, there's a lot of not so great things in our history, which I don't think we want to glance over, but I think sports has kind of been the one thing, especially football, that I think the South has always been kind of a sense of pride in terms of something that brings people together in terms of just obviously look at college football, always a contender. So I think that's the hope of the show, is to kind of bring some of the positive things about our area and just share that with you guys. And I don't know about you, but I'm happy to see people kind of out and about now, and with hopefully COVID kind of slowing. It seems like, I know around Atlanta, like just running into people and talking about sports, it's been something that I think unites our city, and I'm sure Tampa, and I'm sure New Orleans, I'm sure Charlotte, or wherever you're at. So I don't know, that's kind of what I was just thinking about that. We forgot to talk about that in our first episode, so I wanted to give Andre 3000, which you weren't expecting, just a shout out for the name. So anything you got, Kelsey, to add?
No. Stay tuned for Justin Bieber.
Yes. They were asking for how do we sell this, other than our lovely faces, how do they sell this show? And I said Justin Bieber. We don't have Justin Bieber, but if we did, Taylor Swift, just heavy hitters.
Next go-to.
But we appreciate all you guys. Feel free, if you're watching this on delay, if you're catching it on the Facebook feed later, chime in the comments with your city and your state. We're just curious to see where you're watching from, but we appreciate you staying with us for our second and hopefully many more episodes. We'll be back with you most likely next week, unless something breaks this week. If something breaks again, like Matt Ryan gets traded, God forbid, or something crazy, Tom Brady creates a new social media platform, we'll be here with you. Anything breaking news. Otherwise, we'll be back with you next week. And that's all we got for you. See ya.